Hello and welcome everyone to the Voltamex new release webinar. My name is Sharon and I head up product marketing for Voltamex. And I'm joined by two of my favorite product folks today. Andrew and Suhas, will you take a second to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm Vice President of Product Management for Voltamex.
Hey, I'm Suhas. I'm the Head of Product Management for Voltamex. I'm the Director.
All right, thank you both. So we're starting the new year with lots of exciting news. For starters, if you're familiar with HCL software and Voltamex, we just launched an exciting new rebrand with a new logo and colors. So you might notice that things are looking a little bit different around here, but definitely better. So for those who aren't familiar with Voltamex, don't worry, you are still at the right place. This webinar is split into two parts. Part one here will be an introduction to Voltamex. I'll start by showing you some of the challenges we've helped organizations solve. Andrew will then walk you through the business benefits of what's new in our latest release. And then Suhas will provide a little bit more of a technical overview of our platform that will help lay the groundwork to help you understand part two of the webinar, which will be a deep dive into the new features. So you can find part two in the link below. Hopefully you'll join us there after this. And please feel free to drop us a comment or question and we'll get right back to you. So let's dive right in. All right, so if you are a business leader or developer joining us today, I'm sure some of these challenges resonate with you as we've seen with many of our customers. Business leaders, you're always thinking of ways to accelerate innovation within your organization, finding new and better ways to engage with your customers, partners, and even internally within the organization among employees. And part of the solution to your customer and employee experience might be to automate your business processes or perhaps create new app solutions altogether. As for our developers in the crowd, I'm sensing that you're getting tasked by the business units to deliver their applications fast when you might already be dealing with a backlog. And of course, you're always finding ways to improve your development efficiency and velocity. So hopefully these challenges I've mentioned really got your heads nodding. And you know what? You are not alone. Forbes recently released a report just last month describing C-suite priorities moving into 2023. We've got 57% of CEOs who said that an investment in customer experience will be the #1 growth driver. And we've also got our chief HR officers who believe that employee experience does show a direct impact to revenue. So we went to Forrester to commission a study, and we really saw the same results, and it even revealed some gaps. 72% say that they want to improve their CX applications, and of course, mobile being key to that experience and engagement. And that brings us back to IT and how they need to be equipped to deliver. There's clearly a need to respond faster and provide really next level, sophisticated, personalized experiences, but we don't want to bog them down with the complexity of hand coding and needing to be an expert with every new operating system or technology that comes out. It's just really hard to keep up. So to solve for this, we see that close to 70% of decision makers are turning to low code and making that their top 3 IT priorities. So I talked a lot about CX and EX, and clearly Voltamex plays in the low code space. But before we talk about our platform, I want to show you some examples of the type of CX and EX challenges we've seen recently and how we've helped our customers solve for them. So let's start with CX, the C here being both citizen and customer. Just last year, we've helped a North American state government with a series of mobile applications that help over 12 million citizens get access to crucial government services. So think court hearing schedules, child support information, and access to food stamps. Prior to making these services digital, these were primarily paper-driven processes where citizens had to fill and mail out these forms. And that's surprisingly common in government services across states. And it's a sector that's really known to be slow to adopt to new technologies. So with Voltimex, we've moved these key services into 5 different applications in less than a year. And because we're dealing with government and citizen information, it was key that our platform and the apps were actually compliant to stringent security standards. So now let's take a look at big consumer facing application. This customer has more than 1,000 stores nationwide, and their application is highly rated with more than 2 million active users monthly. I think this brand has included some pretty innovative features like voice search and wayfinding within the store that really engage customers. So when the pandemic hit, they knew that they had to shift their customer experience and added new features like touchless checkout and curbside pickup. These new features were not small in scope and really needed to be done quickly, so we managed to add them to the app in just 4 weeks. The reporting in 2021 showed that despite the pandemic, they were able to attribute a 25% increase in revenue from the application. Now, let's talk about employee experiences. We've done quite a few of those too. The first being a manufacturing plant example. I really like this story because it really started out a little bumpy. The workers were initially very resistant to change. They liked their paper processes, and the digital transformation manager assigned to this project knew that it was going to be an uphill battle with adoption. She knew that the apps needed to provide instant value to employees, and their involvement was key. So we worked really closely with her to ensure that the apps were first easy to use and that we were iterating on apps as fast as possible to prove that we were taking employee feedback seriously. Again, we had a bumpy start with only 7 users at the start of the project, but as the year progressed, we saw an increase in adoption to 60,000 employees. The digital transformation manager also mentioned that the increase was due to word of mouth. As workers started to see value in the application, they became advocates internally. The other example I have here is an app we built for a large insurance provider. They needed an application for their agents to help with training and compliance. With easy access to the support resources in the app, the agents were actually able to improve first call resolution. And of course, because mandatory training is submitted in the app, that helped with tracking and auditing. But the customer feedback I liked the most here was when they said that this internal app provided them a hiring advantage. A lot of their competition were still paper-based, and while some have already digitized their customer experience, improving employee experience seemed to be an afterthought. So this app helped them attract new IT workers who were more in tune with mobile and social technology that the growing population of millennial workers are used to. All right, so now that you have a taste of our success stories, how do we actually make this happen for our customers? For that, I turn it to Andrew to give you the overview and magic of our platform.
Thank you, Sharon. My job is to tell you what is Voltimex. It's an industry-leading multi-experience low-code platform. But what does that really mean? It's a platform, a design experience, and an integration layer for building great-looking applications where your customers, employees live digitally. Also, what's important is the multi-experience piece of it, which supercharges your professional developers. So those familiar with JavaScript can do some really important things. They can basically imagine their application and they can build it to any level of complexity, and they can deploy it across multiple different types of devices or web experiences with one piece of code. They can also integrate data systems and processes with ease, and they can take advantage of the latest VR, AR, beacon, or NLP technology very easily without being an expert. What also Voltimex enables customers to do is to build great applications for public sector, regulated industries where security and complexity are just part of what they do. And ultimately here, Voltimex is recognized by all of these industry analyst firms as being an innovator in our space. So why Voltimex? Well, why have a multi-experience low-code platform? Well, you need to innovate, you need to fight the competition, you need to build and solve business problems, and you need to retire that backlog. And you do that with a low-code multi-experience platform to save you time and reduce your application development costs. You also do that because whether you're a small development team or a distributed development team across a geographically spaced organization, you can do that. And you can also take advantage of your standard DevOps tool chains simultaneously. And being a low code platform compared to pro code, it's all about saving time and producing less code. So our customers report that compared to other types of techniques, they can reduce the amount of code they produce by 80%. Now, I mentioned multi-experience is really important. So multi-experience here means that you can take advantage of the full fidelity of a particular device you're using, maybe an Apple Watch, and you want to provide haptic feedback to notify someone. Maybe you want to take advantage of geospatial capabilities, the AR capabilities of the device to make your application really engaging, or you want to be able to deliver that on web. You can do all of that with a multi-experience development platform and write one piece of code. Also, what you're able to do in this environment is to be able to reuse some of the components that you build across multiple applications so you can modularize things. Also, you can engage with your Fusion teams. That means, as a developer, working with the corporate designer on the look and feel, the business stakeholders who are giving you the requirements, as well as working with the QA teams. And as I mentioned, we make security, automated testing, and scalability really easy for organizations so they don't have to worry about that complexity. So let's take a look at what's new in 9.5. So what's new in Voltamex 9.5? For me, the biggest innovation that's going to have the most impact to you out there is the support for super and micro app development. So let's start with a quote from Gartner that says 50% of the world's population will be using multiple super apps daily, such as WhatsApp. And super apps are all about providing a destination that's sticky, that delivers more value and more services to you through the framework of a single super app. Now, what makes them special is being able to tailor those microservices and their experience to you and show you specific micro apps or services that help you to deliver, to have a connected digital experience. As developers on the IT side, it means that you can deliver a richer experience. It makes it easier for you to be more agile in your development and maintenance processes. But also, if you take this airline example here, you don't have to bump out to a PWA or a web app to be able to pull in a particular service. You can add any of these modular capabilities like managing the flight, the check-in, the flight status in a single piece of code for both iPhone and Android in an integrated way. And if you want to add another third-party service that could be applicable to a set of your users, you can do that much faster than you've ever been able to do that before. So very exciting. So there's lots to enjoy in Voltamex 9.5. Here are 3 of my favorite things I know that will have value to you out there. The first area is around automating complex processes. So a multi-experience low-code platform isn't just about building applications. It's about digitizing processes and streamlining the existing processes you have today. So these capabilities around processes and workflow and business rules have always been inherent in the product. But we've added some important innovations to be able to deal with those complex use cases. So thinking about airlines again, imagine I'm a member of the flight crew and I see a blocked toilet. And we all know blocked toilets equals delays. So within my application as part of the flight crew, I notify I have a blocked toilet. Well, it can initiate a workflow which goes to a supervisor that can assign a plumber and a janitor to be able to solve the problem. Once a janitor and a plumber have been identified, accepted the request, it's when both of those people have actually completed their job, will the supervisor and the flight crew be notified that everything has been completed? So very simple example for something that can be sketched out and implemented visually very easily. Now, why is this important? It means it's built into the product. It means you don't have to buy any additional software to digitize your processes, and it ultimately reduces complexity and cost for the types of solutions you deliver. So let's talk about the second area, which is really fast and error-free deployment. So as a developer working with my business stakeholder, I'm building an application. Now we're building it, we're sharing it, we're testing it, but I want to make sure that that application is high quality and has the best user experience possible. So with this release, we're building in those automated test processes directly into the design experience that Suhas will talk about a bit later. So right from the inception of the application lifecycle and integration with your existing tool chains, you'll be able to start testing from day one. Ultimately, that's going to reduce cost and save you time. And ultimately, people are going to have a much better experience. We make it very simple without adding additional code. And lastly, the third area for me is really increasing collaboration, right? So having an idea from working with a stakeholder to realize that idea in that back and forth prototyping iterations, but even before you come to deploy it in a Google or an Apple App Store, you want to make sure that you're getting feedback from as many members of the stakeholders as possible. So we make that really easy. So we give a preview capability for both mobile and tablet form factor. So you can distribute the access to the application through a simple code here, and you can have the people, the business stakeholders test it, give you feedback, and ultimately provide that feedback and make improvements in the application. It just simplifies and speeds up the process and ultimately reduces complexity. Now, there's a lot more in this release, and I know Suhas will unpack that when we get to part 2 of the presentation. And you'll also cover some of the other areas that I wasn't able to cover today. So before we get to part 2, we're going to have Suhas round out part 1, and he's going to give you an overview of the platform, so you'll have a context for understanding his technical deep dive in part 2. Thanks much. Over to you, Suhas.
Thanks, Andrew and Sharon. Now let's start by looking at an overview of the VoltMX platform. So MX, the word MX in VoltMX stands for multi-experience. The question starts with why? Why do you need a multi-experience development platform? Well, when you look at the world that we are in, we have so many technologies. You have native, which has iOS, Android, and Windows. It has different designs, adaptive, as well as it has different modern experiences, machine learning, augmented reality, AI chatbots, and nested layers, voice assistants, and you have the web with its own set of standards like HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, responsive web, as well as PWA. Now, with all these technologies, you want something which supports and has all the advantages of a native app, right? Support all the native technology. Native gives you the maximum performance. It is great for high transaction and pixel perfect applications. You also want something which has the advantages of a web application, lightweight, no app store submission, great for simple user experiences. And where MX comes, VoltMX comes, is it gives one platform which lets you support all of this, right? You can build progressive web applications, you can build responsive web applications, you can build hybrid web applications, you can build pure native applications, all from one code base. Now let's look at how VoltMX does this, right? So VoltMX at a very high level is an application development platform which can build applications for any of this. Mobile wearables, desktop, IoTs, chatbots, kiosks, your phones, tablets, right? Everything. And it can get the data for showing this from any system of your choice. It can connect to ERPs, any APIs, any CRM systems, databases, SaaS applications, IoT, any backend, and catering to any front end. And what is there in between is the platform, which we call as VoltaMX. Now, VoltaMX itself has several parts. Iris is basically our IDE. We'll look into it in a bit more detail. Foundry is our data backend. Flare is basically our omnichannel library, which is making the magic sauce, so to speak. We have our own marketplace, which is going to have a host of quick start apps and components to ensure our app developers have something that is similar to what they are trying to build. Maybe it is an augmented reality app, maybe how it is connecting to a specific voice assistant, or how to do a signature capture, or how to build some type of a chart, or even something like a simple login form, right? The marketplace has hundreds of these components to quick start the application development. We also have DevOps and automated testing, as well as cloud native and SaaS hosting. Now, let's look into each of them in a bit more detail, right? So, to start with, Iris, which is the IDE, which is used for rapid visual assembly, as well as Foundry, which is basically our middleware, right? Now, let's look at Iris. Iris is used to build your WYSIWYG application. WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. It actually has a drop down. I'll show a short overview of it, showing the exact representation of how this form or screen that you're designing is going to look on each of the platforms. It is multimodal. It supports visual workflow editor. The APIs that you're writing, the code that you're writing, or that is being generated by your visual workflow is going to be in JavaScript. However, it has the native layers as part of Flare, which translates it to the actual native API for each platform specifically. It has ability to integrate with Foundry as well as native and web prototyping, right? And what is the biggest advantage of using this is basically you have a rapid visual assembly, and you can use the pre-wired components and templates and sample apps. They effectively gain a huge reduction in the actual code and the time it takes for you to develop. And it also connects with App Viewer, which Sharon briefly covered earlier, which is going to give a real-time preview of the app that you're building without actually fully building the application. We'll shortly cover that too. So Iris has an omni-channel design and development tool. You can basically drag and drop and create your visual canvas. You can reuse the components, right? Now let's just look at what Iris uses under the hood. So Iris uses something called as Flare. And what Flare does is it's basically containing all the platform code to create the native widgets and native layers for the applications that you are building. The application developer is building the application using the drag and drop tool or writing plain JavaScript, and the Flare layer ensures it translates all of that to the native layer so that the application that you are actually building and running on your device is 100% native, right? And it takes care of creating, say, HTML5 CSS output when you're building a web application versus an Android application in Java or an iOS application in Objective-C and so on, right? And this is basically the magic sauce or secret sauce, so to speak, that is taking care that the output from the platform is a pure native application, right? And in addition, Flare also gives you access to the native iOS and Android device APIs if you need. If you want to write some specific code that is, like finding battery percentage for a specific device model, and that is not exposed as a direct API from the platform, we have something called as a native function interface or NFI, using which you can still write JavaScript code to be able to access that NFI layer and get full access to the iOS and Android device APIs that is there. Now let's look at a quick demo of both Iris and App Preview, right? So this is Iris. So it effectively has, as you see, a form layout. You have the structure of each of the forms that we are talking about. It has form layout for different form factors, mobile, tablet, responsive, variables, because each of them can have different screens and effectively different content. You can set your look and feel with the skin section of it, and you can set your background images. You see the WYSIWYG. I can see exactly how it is going to look at the Google Pixel 6 versus a Pixel 5. I'm looking at it from the Android native perspective. You see the exact screen resolution, and what you see here is exactly how it is going to render. So I can switch to an Apple and see how it is going to look in an iPhone 13 Pro, or switch to a web rendering office and see how it is going to look if I'm going to build a web application, an adaptive web application for the screen. I can go to data and services, configure new services. This connects to Foundry. I can connect to my integration or identity service. And this is connecting to Foundry in real time and getting the services from there. The data model that I'm connecting to in the backend that I am connecting from my application, I can view them also right from here. I have project settings, which lets me define the application name, what backend application I'm connecting to. I also have an app store. So app store effectively is a way to, this is an enterprise app store. It lets you publish applications to the server, the Foundry server itself, and download them and view them from your application. So if you are not going to the public app store, that is, if it is not a B2C application, or even if it is a B2C application, during your testing phase, if you want to share with your QA team or with other developers, an app store is a convenient and easy way for sharing your applications. You just scan the QR code, you give access to whoever you want to be able to download that specific app, and they'll be able to download it. It is effectively an app store of its own, an enterprise app store. Right? We also have different metrics configurations. So Iris captures a host of analytics without the app developer having to write a line of code. It is as easy as clicking a checkbox to say whether I want to automatically capture every time a form is entered, how much time it took to load my application, what are all the different granularities it took for my service to respond, if there is an error, which line of code it errored, if there is a crash, give the exact full stack trace, and a lot more of this is available out of the box. If you don't want to capture all this information, you can of course uncheck this as a build setting, right? And you can directly build it for preview. Preview, we will show how to run the preview and see the preview in the app viewer shortly. You can build it for debug as in the debug mode. It lets you troubleshoot, lets you put breakpoints, and lets you see how the application is running. You can also directly access the marketplace from here, and you can also see how the logic is created, or create the logic directly using the flowchart kind of action editor right from the UI here. So here this is showing on click of a specific button how it is going through the different loops, invoking a service. I can see the mappings being updated. I can see the request and response being mapped from the text field here to the service, and I can see that you are dismissing the loading indicator, showing alert for a failure, and progressing with a lot of if and while loops and navigating to the form. So effectively, you can create very complicated logic just with this. You have a design view, and as you see, even with this, there is a code view which shows that this is the actual code that gets generated even when you are creating the client application logic using the workflow editor on the client side. So here we are seeing the marketplace components. The marketplace effectively, as we said earlier, has a lot of sample applications and components to help kickstart application development. You can see that I can preview some of them. I can open this directly from Iris. I can see if I want to preview this, what is the shortcode for using in my app viewer. I can see videos of them. I can import this directly to Workspace, right? I can scan them at the app viewer. The QR code is always available, right? We also have Automator, which is basically the test automation. You can learn more about the test automation by joining the part 2 of the video, where we have detailed demos of that. And here we are just showing all the different types of built-in components that are directly available. In addition to the basic widgets, if you want to create a chart or list view, you can directly drag and drop that kind of form that you want, and it will bring in all the necessary dependencies and help that get created. So I just added a component for a specific type of view to showcase the same. And yeah, so we have a list of icons and several different things that you can make use of. Or if I want to just click on specifically add a radio button or a label or a button and customize, I have all of that. So now let's look at hikes. Hikes is basically built-in tutorials that are part of the IDE Iris itself. So if you want to learn how to build your first mobile app, how to build a web application, how to connect to the data, this is built into the thing, and it will show you markers, say do this, do that, and it is a very easy way of learning the tool, right? And learning how to build applications using Iris. Now let's move on to App Viewer. App Viewer is basically, as we said, it is a app preview tool. So when you're building an application, especially for native channels like iOS native application or Android native application, you need to have the full Android SDK or the Xcode installed for building the final binary. You have to sign them with the appropriate certs and all that stuff. But to ease application development and have a quick way of previewing the entire application, not just the UI, full functional logic of the application like it would run on an actual app, that is where App Viewer comes in. So App Viewer can connect to your laptop and get the code directly using USB. If both are in the same network, you can just get the QR code and stuff from your Wi-Fi, or if you can publish the application to web to the cloud as well. And you'll get a 5-digit code, and that code you can use it yourself. You can scan the QR code that is showing up in your build system in Iris when you're building this, or you can share this code with any of your co-workers, your business person who wants to give you feedback, or QA person who wants to give you feedback, whatever. You can share that 5-digit code, and that lets you import that application, right? So once you just launch it, it pulls the code in. So what App Viewer does is it lets you preview that code and use it as though you've actually installed that application. And you can run all the functionality that you would run on a regular application. If your application uses any of the native function interfaces, that is custom OS level code that you have written, only those portions will not work in App Viewer. Every other piece, which means 99% of the functionality for most of the apps, will work fine with App Viewer and let you quickly preview it and get feedback. So as you see, feedback is built into the App Viewer itself. So when somebody is reviewing it, they want to give some feedback, they can just tap on that and start giving feedback and enter. And this goes back to the developer that has published that application. They'll be able to go to a specific section in Iris and see the feedback on that form. This also connects to Marketplace, the same thing that we saw earlier, but now from within this, you can preview any of the components that are published to Marketplace. I just click on the preview button. It downloads the same thing as though it's an app. I can see, for example, a carousel view, or if I'm looking for something else, any image gallery or signature capture, I can just click on that, click on preview, and I'll be able to preview that. It also lets you view your reporting data, like your active users and all the other host of reporting that is available as part of Foundry, right? So this gives you a quick preview of App Viewer. Now let's look at some of the more security-related features of building apps with VoltMX. So VoltMX comes with advanced obfuscation. It has code and resource encryption, right? It comes with the debug detection, resource verification. In fact, there is a protected mode as an optional, it is just a checkbox during build, and it is available for all the apps that are built with VoltaMX, which ensures that app doesn't run on root devices. It detects swizzling, detects hooking. Effectively, it makes your application protected without having to go to any third party for putting in tamper resistance or hardening your application from hackers and malwares and other exploits, right? So protected application is something we give out of the box. Now let's look at Foundry. So Foundry is basically our enterprise backend. It is both a middleware as well as a connector layer. It manages identity for authentication as well as data integration. It has business rules. It is also an API management layer. It has a developer portal that you can expose to your end developers or partners. It also comes with built-in security as well as a ton of analytics and reporting built in, right? So at a very high level, it lets you even create your own data models, right? And visually map your client data model to the server's backend model, in fact, giving another layer of abstraction. So if you want to switch from, say, a database to a Salesforce or some other API tomorrow, your client application need not even be aware because it is programmed to an interface, and that is your client app data model. And your backend app data model is just mapped from the server, and you can change that mapping anytime. You have pre-built and custom connectors. So we have pre-built connectors, and we have also connectors from marketplace, which you can import, and you can always write custom code for any specific niche kind of use case that we have. It also has ability to do orchestration, which is connecting multiple of these integration services together to do more API invocations in the backend, because the backend is a lot more powerful and also has a better network than your client application connecting, for example, doing a login and then an account service and then trying to get some detail of that account. It can do all of that as one call from the client application, and the server does the 3 calls for you, get the data together and send that back. This whole thing is built from a digital first architecture for improved performance and security, and it lets you accelerate backend and third-party integrations to build the application and make it very powerful, right? So this is a very busy slide, but Foundry does a ton of things, and this is just to showcase some of the things that it does, right? So we basically have client SDKs that lets you connect to Foundry from, Iris is our IDE, but if you want to build your own application using Xcode or Android or .NET, you have that ability as well. You can connect to all the different backends. There are actually, including the marketplace, like 100 odd connectors. You have the ability to use user identity, and you can use user identity per backend. So for example, in the same application, I might be protecting some APIs with the Google Authenticator or something else with an LDAP, and you can, during development, say this is protected using this is protected using that, and it will ensure that the app developer has logged in, has the appropriate credentials before it even allows connecting to that. It also has offline synchronization capability available. It has an object model, which is also what we talked about, the separate app data model and coding to an interface. With metadata discovery, it has a developer portal and API management with several different versionings. It has analytics built in with a lot of reports, ability to create custom reports, ability to trace the user's journey, as well as application performance management, which includes crash analytics. It has DevOps, it has enterprise app store, build automation, advanced logging, command line interfaces, monitoring the services automatically, and even sending notifications for warning or critical thresholds. It has security built into it. So Foundry does a ton of things. Now let's look at a quick preview of Foundry. So this is me logging into Foundry, and so Foundry has several different applications. Whatever you created, you can give access to the applications per person. You can grant access at an API level or at an application level. I can go to a specific app and see the services within them. And API management is where I can go and look at each of the APIs. An API can be shared across different applications. I can create an own identity authentication API or an integration API. Integration is for data connection, identity is for authentication. I have several different types. I can have data connecting to a database, to a dialog flow. I can even mock the data when I'm not having a backend and still building the client application using mock data. So here we are showing something like an XML and a backend. You can have a base URL, you can have advanced operations. So for example, this is connecting to news to one API, for local news and category from another API. So you can have different operations within the same service. Orchestration, as we said, is for stitching together multiple services. So for example, if I want to get news and weather in the same thing, when they are hitting two different backends, I can create one API which is connecting to two different systems, or it can be doing it concurrently or sequentially, depending. I can have different levels of authentication protection for them. So I can make the API available publicly, which means if they know the URL, they can hit and get it. I can make it anonymous, as in the application has to be allowed. I mean, they have to access it from an application built with Iris and Foundry, and only then it will be accessible. Authenticated, as in they have to have an identity. They've logged in using that API, and only then it has access. And I can even make them private for APIs that only server-to-server communication is allowed, right? So I have different levels of granularity that I can support. It also has objects, which we spoke about, which is built on top of the other things. I can create my object data model, and it can connect to all the different API backends that we spoke of already earlier. And this also lets you support offline applications because it is still working with that object data model. Here we see the different fields of that particular thing. You can have the mapping. You see the client app data model and the server, what the field is mapped to, right? And you can map all the fields that you want. You can see the different verbs, the CRUD verbs, and even you can create custom verbs if you want, and what you are giving access to. Here we are showing this connecting to a database, what are all the connection parameters it needs. So basically showing how this whole connection works. Workflow is another capability which lets you run long business process workflows. Please join webinar 2 for a lot more detail into workflows. And rules is another simple English type language for writing simple rules like, hey, credit greater than this, do X, greater than, less than this, fail it. So English type of business logic for quick things that can be run on the server. This is another type of service that you can run. So here we see, to want to test it, you don't even have to deploy it. You just choose what environment, change your input parameter, and you test this right off the bat from the server console itself. And you can save and retest. You can see the log, see what data is going where. So here I'm changing and seeing it, the approve, reject, and fail test cases. This is showing what is the request that sent, payload, the response payload, how much time it took in milliseconds from the perspective of analytics and such. All of this is available to you right from the Foundry console. We also have developer portal. If you want to make this available as an API portal for your developers or partners to connect to. So you just give the API key and secret to them with the URL, and they can hit it from anything like a Postman and test their apps, and they can basically connect into the API definition right at this point of time. So this is showing that a client portal, and as we said, you also have different client SDKs if you want to connect to them outside of the Iris land as well. This is showing all the different clouds that are there. If you're using our VoltMX cloud, similar UI appears for the on-premise portal as well. And here we are seeing engagement services. Engagement is, I'll briefly cover this later. It is basically for engaging with your applications, so for sending SMS, push notifications, email, and such. And you have the report section where you can view all the standard reports. You can build your own reports. You can create your funnel reports. You can create new metrics and track them as well. So all this capability is available out of the box. So this gives you a brief of what Foundry does. Again, it is a lot of information. If you're more interested, please see our documentation. We have detailed guides on all of this, and I would highly recommend you joining the webinar too to see about a lot of the newer features that we have introduced in Iris and Foundry. Now, going back to engagement, as we said, engagement is for keeping engaged with your customers. So primarily sending notifications, push messages, silent push messages, emails, any kind of marketing campaign, right? It can track location. You can create segments by location, segments by other attributes, and you can also have geolocation triggered messages sent to them. It also can manage passes like iOS wallet and all that. It helps you create user segments. So this is basically VoltaMX engagement. DevOps is another capability that is available as part of VoltaMX. So take a typical scenario of an application developer checking in code into their source repository. It automatically, using a CI continuous integration scheduler, auto builds. The user logs into the build console, otherwise executes a manual build. Basically, you can put it on a scheduler or trigger it when you want. It builds it for all the supported channels, iOS, Android, web application, desktop executables if you want. It sends an email to the user and also store the result when the build is complete. After that, it can deploy that, say if it is a Foundry application, to a SIT or a test environment for doing the test. Then it can be hooked up with a device farm and automated run test cases. And then once the test is complete, again send the test results and stuff, email it as well as store it for future use. And then now that the test has passed in the SIT environment, it can push it to whatever we have configured it to, QA or higher level environment. So this entire continuous integration, continuous deployment, testing, source control is done as part of the VoltaMX DevOps App Factory tool, right? So now coming back, in a nutshell, what makes VoltaMX special? VoltaMX gives you a single code base, right, with which you can generate native and web applications. It has embedded security. It provides great developer productivity and return of investment. It is a no-compromise platform because you want fully native, full performant application, you get it. You want offline, you get it. You want secure apps, you get it, right? It has integration built in. It has best user experience, high performance, scalable, has workflows and rules. And back to you, Sharon, to conclude this session. Thank you.
So thank you so much to Suhas and Andrew for that presentation. And thank you for all of our viewers for joining us today. I do want to leave you with a couple of goodies before we end the webinar. If you would like to get hands-on, we have a free 30-day trial for you to try building an application on VoltaMX. The best part is that you get full access to the platform, so feel free to play around and start building your application. But if you're ready to get started, let's get connected. Maybe you already have an app idea or a specific challenge you need to solve. Our team can help you through your use case and get your first app built in as fast as 4 weeks. I've left the QR codes here for you and the URL. You should also receive a follow-up email from this webinar with links to these resources. So as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, that we do have part 2 lined up for you, presented by Suhas. He will take you through a technical deep dive of all of our latest features. This is a great session for all existing customers, but if you're new here, it's still a great chance for you to see our platform in action. We're really excited about our product and this release. Thank you for joining us today. We hope to speak to you soon, and we'll see you in part 2.